All right, Monday night is the final night of the hockey season as unbelievably we have a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Final. Winner take all Game 7 between the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. So let's break it down, and we're going to do it with NHL analyst Kasey Hudson, who joins me now. Kasey, how's it going?
It's going really well. I mean, we've got one more game for the hockey season. So if you're a hockey fan in general, you're excited about that. But if you're a Panthers fan, you're probably freaking out a little bit. So
Yeah.
the temperature is a bit different, I'll say.
Yeah, it all depends. If you're a neutral hockey fan, you're probably just happy for some more hockey. Like you said, if you're a Panthers fan, yeah, freaking out. That seems about right. If you're an Oilers fan, you might be freaking out, but you're playing with house money because you're a little excited. So it's interesting how all this can go. Now, Kasey, as you just mentioned, Florida, they were up 3-0 in this series. Now they face the chance of blowing that lead in the Cup Final, which has never happened before. The Oilers, on the other hand, they have the chance to be the first Canadian team to win it all since 1993. So I got to ask you this. Who has more pressure heading into this Game 7? Is it the Oilers or is it the Panthers?
You know, at first I wanted to say the Oilers, of course, because of what this means to Canada. And not only what it means to Canada, but what it means to Connor McDavid and his career and kind of the pedestal that he's put on, not only because of his skill set, but his leadership and the engine that he has been for this Oilers team. But considering getting up 3-0 in a series and then dropping 3 games and now getting ready to lose a Stanley Cup Final in back-to-back years, I have to say the pressure is on the Florida Panthers. You know, they were in this spot last year, not particularly this spot, but, you know, they had a chance to hoist the cup and they missed it, not because they weren't a good team, but because Vegas was the better team. They end up in this series matchup as the better team, edging in multiple categories, show that to the world, and then drop the ball, and now we're at a Game 7. So I got to go with the Florida Panthers on this one, because if it's me and I go into the building and lose Game 7 after being 3-0 in the series, my soul is going to leave my body.
Yeah, I think so. And for all the Panthers fans, their souls will leave their body as well, too. Not something they want to talk about, but here we are talking about it. But as we look at this Game 7, Kasey, and we look at the Oilers' comeback here in this series, what is the moment for you that turn this series around for Edmonton? Is there a moment you could pinpoint here where things shifted for the Oilers?
Yeah, I think for the Oilers, they came into this matchup obviously confident in their particular skill set. I mentioned the edges the Panthers have slightly, but one of the edges that the Oilers had was their speed and this high-octane offense. And how are the Florida Panthers going to slow them down and contain Connor McDavid? And I think that they realized that they have depth scoring. They just haven't relied on it that much. And other guys had to get involved. And we saw them create a number of line changes, about 8 to be exact, to see where that momentum and that spark was going to come in, to where it wasn't the Connor McDavid show, but it was the Edmonton Oilers show. So what they did is they started to kind of take their speed, individualize, and use that to kind of spread out the Florida Panthers defense, flatten them out a little bit, be the team that starts to take advantage of odd man rushes and create it more consistently. So now you're not just focused on Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl, who was kind of silent throughout this series. You're now worried about a Connor Brown and Adam Henry and company. And then you've got Corey Perry, who's an expected veteran presence on that roster in his 5th Stanley Cup Final with a different team. So I think the Oilers just found a way to kind of change their game a little bit, change the narrative. They did surprise people with their physicality, and they showed they can actually not be intimidated by the Florida Panthers forecheck. They can use their speed to minimize the forecheck of the Florida Panthers and command the game. So I think it took those first 3 games to kind of readjust their game and find out how can they beat a Florida Panthers team that's checking every box and playing 60 minutes of hockey. And they found a way to use special teams, which has been their specialty all season long, to their advantage, and use that as a momentum swing. Opening up 2 games with shorthanded goals. Shorthanded goals are like one of the most electrifying feelings that you can think of. So to open the scoring that way is going to give you so much swag, so much confidence, so much momentum. So they just found a way to pull the puck back into their corner.
Yeah, they've made the adjustments, and it seems like Florida has not shifted and adjusted back to the adjustments that the Oilers have made. And when you talk about that scoring there, Kasey, Edmonton, they've scored 5+ goals in the last 3 games. Other teams this postseason, they have not figured out Sergei Bobrovsky. What have the Oilers done right against the Panthers goaltender that you've seen in the last 3 games?
Yeah, this is a pretty wild statistic, because initially in this series, they weren't getting off any high danger shots and goals. They were kind of getting crammed when it comes to scoring opportunities. But some adjustments that they made, they started to find ways to get into the middle of the ice. The Panthers completely dominated and took the middle of the ice away from the Rangers and other teams, and then they came into the series doing it to the Oilers. and the Oilers had to get creative. That's where the speed kind of comes back into play. They found a way to get into the middle of the ice. They found a way to create more traffic in front of Bobrovsky, taking away his eyes, forcing him to kind of change his game to an uncomfortable standpoint. He doesn't typically play so deep in the crease, but you're seeing him back up and get so tight in the net. You're seeing him make some uncharacteristic mistakes, and that's because the defense is being forced to play differently in front of him. Very flat. They're not taking away those lanes from the Oilers as productively as they were previously. So that's how the Oilers are getting in here and not only scoring on those special team moments, but also stepping up on 5-on-5. They had 3 even strength goals in the last game. And if they pull that into game 7, we're going to be looking at a bit of a wild ride. So they just figured out how to stop shooting so low on Bobrovsky. That's one of his specialties. That's one of his best ways to command the net. They started getting some pucks over his shoulder. They started racking up on those high danger goals. And now we've got a series, more importantly.
Yeah, we've got ourselves a series in a winner-take-all Game 7. Speaking of that Game 7, which is the last game left in this NHL season, I got to ask you about the keys here, Kasey. What are the keys to each team coming out on top and getting a win in Game 7? So give me your keys for the Oilers and your keys for the Panthers.
I'll start with the Oilers. My keys for the Oilers to be hoisting Lord Stanley at the end of this all is them to come back out and set the tone in the first period. That's obviously worked in their favor. They're really good at commanding and building off of momentum swings. It just turns into a domino effect for scoring for them. Again, with the 5-on-5. They're not relying on special teams to collect their goals. They're starting to get the job done on even strength, and a lot of that's contributed to their second line in Henrik and Janmark as well as Brown. They're the guys that are helping create those odd man rushes. They've had some extremely well-timed line changes, I can say, that gives them breakaway opportunities that really just keeps the Panthers on their heels. Using their speed to pick apart the defense, they have to continue that. So it's just that consistent attack. It's keeping the puck over on the other end, and it's kind of checking the boxes. They can't fizzle out in the third period, especially not in Game 7. So if they can show up for as close to 60 minutes of hockey as possible, use their speed, rack up on 5-on-5, and take advantage of every opportunity possible, and every guy gets involved, especially their top 6 players, then that's how the Oilers kind of command this game. And Stuart Skinner's been fantastic. He can just carry that over. As for the Florida Panthers, we've seen them play such dominant hockey. In my opinion, they were the most complete team heading into this series. What they have to get back to is kind of forcing the Oilers to play their game. The Oilers have kind of minimized their forechecking capability. They've got to bring that physicality and forechecking back, because what happens when they rack up on forechecking versus the Oilers specifically is that they create more gaps in the Oilers zone, and they create their own scoring chances and opportunities where they don't have to focus on speed. They just focus on the opportunity. Defense has to get out of their head, stop playing so flat, stop getting so scattered in front of Bobrovsky so that they can help him out to take away those scoring lanes. We haven't seen much of their depth. It's either Rodriguez's night or one specific guy's night. So more guys have to get involved. A line that deserves a shout out is Lusterian, Lundell, and Tarasenko. They've been such a great line with creating scoring opportunities. They just have to get back focused with creating those chances for their team. And realistically, the Panthers wouldn't be in such a bad position if they didn't have a bunch of sloppy turnovers. They've got to come into this with their head on straight and their hockey IQ shining, and they have to stop making those disastrous turnovers in their zone, because a lot of goals are coming off of those turnovers. They got to get back to taking away the puck, being puck hounds, being physical, and being the overwhelming dominant team that they can be. And that's how they will be lifting Lord Stanley at the end.
All right, so we got the keys for both teams and what they have to do to lift Lord Stanley at the end of this Game 7, but we got our keys, so now we have to go to a prediction. Last thing for me, Kasey, who do you have winning this Game 7, and who will be hoisting the Stanley Cup at the end of Game 7 on Monday night?
Yeah, this one's so hard for me to decide. You can't look away from what the Oilers have done, how they've rallied, how they've dug themselves out of a hole. I like to call it the Shania Twain effect, but apparently it's because they are just crushing it and playing their best hockey, obviously. But if I really had to put my finger on something, I just can't imagine the Florida Panthers dropping 4 games. We're talking about a team that didn't even have back-to-back losses until they faced the Rangers, and they overcame that and obviously moved through the series. So for them, it's the fact that they just need to make adjustments. And I'm sorry, Oilers fans. I'm sorry, Canada. No disrespect. But the Oilers didn't particularly beat the Florida Panthers playing their best hockey. The Florida Panthers have dug themselves a hole, had miscues, mental errors, mistakes. If we see the Panthers come in and get back to their form, get back to commanding the game, get back to playing their best hockey, I think they're the team to close this one out. We've seen more 60-minute games out of them. They're really good at showing up in the third period, which is the most consistent thing we've at least seen in the last 2 games. And if it ended up going into overtime by any chance, my money would be on the Florida Panthers. So I think they get back their heads straight. I think they bounce back into this, and I think they finally earn their first cup.
Okay, Kasey, so going with the Panthers, and you know what you just did there, you made all of Canada very unhappy. They are not going to like that pick, but we'll see how it all plays out. The Panthers hopefully will not have a major collapse. If you're a Florida fan and the Oilers, could be a fantastic comeback if you are rooting for Edmonton. We'll see how it all happens in Game 7 on Monday night in Florida. That is Kasey Hudson, NHL analyst who does a fantastic job breaking down the sport on various platforms. Kasey, appreciate connecting with you and talking about Game 7. Enjoy the Game 7, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Hopefully it doesn't stress me out too much.
I hope not. No stress for you. Don't want that at all. Thanks, Kasey.